Uh, RPG a day 2017, day 13, and I already want to apologize for being so tired as I am and having a groggy voice. You have no idea. I ran a 6-hour D&D session today with a conspiracy plot and an active NPC that's a parody of Alex Jones. So I've been screaming hyper energetic all day. So now I'm completely drained. On top of which, I went to theater practice for some comedy horror. So let's get this through. Okay, day 13. Describe a game experience that changed how you play. This takes me back to the time that I was something like 17 or so. Uh, until that point, I had only been running and playing these sorts of one shots that were like hypercharged with like this ADHD type of comedy of where something completely random and can happen at any point with lots of pop culture references and all sorts of for the lulz kind of stuff. So that was my reference point to how role-playing games were played up until that point. And I got to play with a lot of new players, and one of those players was an active dungeon master, or rather just the game master. It wasn't D&D. She had this fantasy world that she had created herself that was very much in the same tone as Suikoden games and a lot of other JRPGs like that, and she figured that the way she would like to introduce the setting to us, because it was a setting filled with tons and tons of written down history and all sorts of stuff like that, and with a lot of NPCs, huge amounts of NPCs, spread all around the world, around the map, with lots of villages and cities and everything, and ruins and everything like that marked out in great detail. She figured that the way she would like to introduce the setting was that the players, there were three of us, and she wanted us to play ourselves, and we played this little introduction session, one session long little thing where we three students in the same art school that we were in, went to the local library and found an old tome, old dusty book there, and when we open the book sucks us in, and we find ourselves waking up in this fantasy world, and we woke up in the woods, and it was kind of funny that once we were given the task of playing ourselves in a role-playing game, that was pretty much the first time in a role-playing game where I had this thought of what would my character do. Before that, all of my characters were simply these kind of super impulsive, hyper characters that were simply doing stuff I would like to see done in a game. They were simply extremely reactionary, type of characters who were usually created around a joke or something like that, and they usually had like some superpower or whatever a single setting would allow you to do, and it was pretty much structured around that. No depth at all, no motivations at all, nothing like that. It was just pure impulsory reactions to crazy stuff DMs were throwing our way. And playing ourselves in the RPG gave that a little new kind of a spin, where you're actually thinking, oh well, if I was really in a fantasy world like this, there's no way I would do stuff like this. I wouldn't just impulsively do violent stuff or something like that. And especially when we ran into the first kind of village that we went into, it was this elven village and stuff. I got my first taste of a game master who really role plays their NPCs, because up until that point, I had never been in a role playing game where the NPCs were really fleshed out and they had personality and character, and they were also role played in this what would this character really do in this situation kind of thing. So it was very quickly I kind of stepped into this new role playing world of actually having meaningful conversations with NPCs and actually learning about them as people and all that. And wouldn't you know it, once that village came under threat, I was concerned over the well-being of those villagers that I had gotten to know. So that was a huge eye-opening thing where I kind of realized that games could have that stuff. The kind of realization that games could have like really intriguing and good, like engaging plots. So that came kind of a bit later, because still it was like this thing where I had gotten used to this kind of pace of one session per game kind of thing, where player characters didn't have any longevity. You know, every time you wanted to sit down and role play, you created a new character and you created a new setting, and it was always something crazy and off the wall. Now it was like first sitting in that I want to keep playing with this character. I want to see what happens to him, you know, and that sort of thing. So realizing that kind of opportunity for actually good plots, you know, kind of organically came as a byproduct of first caring about the characters. And even to this day, it's often when I watch movies or read books, you know, it's like, yeah, an interesting and intriguing plot is fine, but if it doesn't have characters I care about, you know, it's not gonna fly very far with me, you know. So it was a great little introduction to what role playing could really offer, you know, especially as a storytelling medium, you know, because before that it was just, you know, kind of, you know, doing stuff you can't do in video games. You know, that was kind of the motivation in a lot of times, and trying to make your fellow players hysterically laugh as often as you could, you know. Still, when I play games, there's oftentimes, you know, when it's a new gamer in a group, they still have that thing where they want to get a reaction out of their fellow gamers, where they want to do something off the wall, very impulsive, and something, you know, nobody thought about, and something that would be like out of game, very funny, but in game, there's, you know, no reason for it and no sense in it kind of thing. And that's something that I kind of shook off with that experience. And from there on in, it just grew. And these days, you know, I've been in games where players actually shed tears when something tragic happens to their characters, and people actually like get bothered when something, you know, messed up happens to their characters and stuff like that. And you can't get that unless you create, you know, believable, relatable characters whose motivations you understand and whose kind of headspace you can kind of latch onto and kind of jump into and make a home out of, you know, for the duration of the game, you know. So yeah, that was pretty much the biggest thing that's changed the way I play these days. So yeah, at the age of 17, it's very natural to, you know, experience a lot of growth in a lot of ways, and that was one of those ways where one's kind of senses and kind of you know, everything in here kind of matured a little bit. You know, it wasn't all that mature even after that yet, but it was still, in terms of role playing and storytelling and all that stuff, it was a vital step, you know, and I appreciate it a lot. So yeah, there you go. See you tomorrow.